How are you? So I'm here with you today, again trying to answer some of your questions. Most of the questions are coming from readers of You Are the Universe, Discovering Your Cosmic Self and Why It Matters. But as I said, you can ask me any question on any topic. And the email to send your questions is info@jayo.com. info@jayo.com. Once again, info@jayo.com. info@jayo.com. You can also download the app Jayo, and this app is available through iTunes and also through Android. And together over here, we are creating a community for a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. So today's topic is something that is not quite easy to understand, but if you bear with me, I think you will see that you will understand why I'm saying that all knowledge ultimately is ignorance of reality or truth, and all knowledge or systems of thought can ultimately lead to and do lead to conflict. So jayo.com, JIYO.com. Okay, so what do I mean by this? Let's start with how we know anything, how we know anything that we call an object. So if I ask you, what is this? You'll say it's a luggage tag. If I say, what is this? You'll say it's a hand. If I ask you, what is this? You'll say a book. And actually, before you have those concepts, book, hand, luggage tag, box, painting behind me, because those are all concepts, before you actually have language, all you experience is a sense perception. You experience a color, you experience a taste, you experience a sensation, you experience a texture, a smell, and that is what we call sense perception. And that sense perception is a mode of knowing. So sound is a mode of knowing. Taste is a mode of knowing. Texture, sensation, form, colors are modes of knowing. And then how we define those, how we put those together, how we put those modes of knowing together become human concepts and human constructs for modes of knowing and experience. Look at a paramecium or some very primitive organism, and its mode of knowing is just sensation. It moves away from anything toxic, unpleasant, towards anything nourishing or pleasant. As we move up the scale of evolution and scale of evolution of consciousness and consciousness of species, there's these modes of sensing take the form of sound, sensation, texture, images, perceptions such as form, color, taste, smell, And then we interpret these modes of knowing through social constructs that have been recycling for thousands of years. And then these constructs or concepts replace the fundamental awareness and modes of knowing, which are modifications of consciousness itself. That's it. So what is thought? It's an interpretation, a construct, a concept that replaces a mode of knowing and experience. And the more we know, no matter what our mode of knowing is, including that which we call rational thought. Because rational thought is based on what was called logic, which is based on trying to understand what we call empirical facts, knowing full well that empirical facts are less than 0.01% of what exists there. 0.01%. Even in knowing one thing as a fact, we have to ignore everything else that leads to that particular mode of knowing. So anything that we can give a name to or describe is a map, a model, a concept, a construct for awareness modifying itself as experience, including that which we call logical thought. Logical thought is the interpretation of a particular mode of knowing, looking at empirical facts, determining linear cause-effect relationships, and creating a system of thought without understanding that the thought itself is a modified form of consciousness, an interpretation of a sensory experience which is also a modified form of consciousness, and then a whole array of stories around that particular mode of knowing and experience. So the more we think we know, the more we lose sight of that which knows. And I'll come back to this in 15 seconds to see what is the solution to real understanding of reality, which is beyond all systems of thought. So now let me conclude what we started, because the statement, all knowledge is ignorance and can lead to conflict, can be misunderstood. So, I was recently at a conversation, a debate, a discussion, whatever you want to call it, with Michael Shermer, and I asked him, what is a thought? And Michael responded and pointed to his head, and he said, it's an electrochemical activity. And I asked him, is that a thought as well? Just the statement that you made, it's an electrochemical activity, is that a thought itself? And if it is, then an electrochemical activity is making an existential statement about itself. It sounds ludicrous, doesn't it? An electrochemical activity making a statement about itself. See, the electrochemical activity is a human construct for a mode of knowing and experience in awareness. And what happens with scientists who believe in an objective universe independent of our knowing of it, independent of awareness, independent of consciousness is that they take subjective experience, they reify it, they objectivize it, and then they create constructs around it called rational thought. These constructs can also be mathematical constructs, and then they sacrifice that which knows for that which is known. And the more you sacrifice that which knows, the awareness that is modifying itself into modes of knowing and experience, the more you lose sight of that which knows. So that is why knowledge is ignorance. Humans have this extraordinary ability to create constructs. We create theological constructs, we create philosophical constructs, we create religious constructs, and we create scientific constructs. And then we embed ourselves in these constructs, in these stories, and then we sacrifice the territory for the map. The map, of course, helps us navigate experience without necessarily knowing how experience occurs. All experience of the world is nothing but sensory perception. And all sensory perception is nothing but consciousness or awareness modifying itself as a mode of knowing, whether that's sound, taste, color, form, smell, sensation or image, and then the interpretation of that, which is called thought, and then whether we like it or dislike it, which is called evaluation. So these are constructs which help navigate experience and create maps of experiences, but the map is not the territory. Okay? So Jesse youngest Lima says, how do you know all this without knowledge? You know all this by becoming a witness of that which you know. So everything that I know is actually a learned phenomenon. I was embedded into these constructs, whether they are scientific or theological or philosophical or religious. But if I can observe my constructs, if I can observe my thoughts, if I can observe my perceptions, if I can observe the images that I experience in my consciousness, then there is insight. And that insight is that that which observes is independent of that which I observe, including all my thoughts, all my constructs, all my knowledge. The observer of knowledge is timelessly present no matter what the knowledge is. And the knowledge, of course, keeps evolving. And the more it evolves, the more we embed ourselves in it, the more we lose sight of that which knows. So, here is the key to finding truth. The key to finding truth is first to understand that you are knowingness itself, that you are the ever-present silent witness in all knowing. And the more you identify yourself with that which you know, the more then the knowledge overshadows that which knows. The more you identify yourself with the scenery, which is a modification of the seer, But the more you identify, embed yourself and in that construct, then the scenery overshadows the seer. The observer is overshadowed by the object. By the knower is overshadowed by that which is known. And the more we do that, the more we sacrifice the self with all the images that the self takes on, the more we lose sight of our true self. This is the real meaning of what does it mean to gain the whole world and lose your soul. This is the meaning of sacrificing the self for the self-image, which we frequently refer to as the ego. The ego is also built out of constructs that we identify with. So that's why all knowledge hides the truth of that which knows. All knowledge hides the truth of that which knows, and all systems of thought, whether they are theological, philosophical, religious, or scientific, create conflict in the end. Thought is the reason for all conflict, because thought turns into ideological constructs and people are ready to give their life up to defend their construct, whether it's a religious construct or a theological construct or a philosophical construct. And scientific constructs usually don't have militant people, although there are some people who refer to themselves as militant atheists, like Richard Dawkins and his buddies, and that kind of scientific dogma also leads to conflict. So do remember that ultimately all knowledge obscures the truth of that which knows, the fundamental awareness, which is without subject-object splits. Thought divides reality, which is one, into subjective experience and objective experience. That's a activity of thought. And then it also creates conflict. So all the conflict in the world is because the one consciousness has been recycling through eons of time as conditioned minds, innumerable conditioned minds. And the conditioned mind is in conflict because it's in separation. And therefore, one has to actually step back, first become a silent witness to all that is, including thought, feeling, emotion, perception, and ultimately let the silent witness also drop into pure being and pure consciousness, which is the fundamental reality in which all is known and also interpreted. And therefore, thought cannot take you there. You have to release thought. You have to become a witness of thought and let the witness also drop, and then you will see that there is no separation. What I see as form and phenomena is an activity of the eye. But what I know as the activity of the eye is an activity of the mind. And what I know as the activity of my mind is the activity of awareness. So ultimately, awareness modifies itself as mind, which creates experience of that which we call body and universe. But in the end, mind, body, universe are modifications of awareness, identifying itself with localized modes of knowing, and then identifying with those modes of knowing, and then embedding ourselves in those modes of knowing, and ultimately forgetting our true self. So just stop for a moment, be a spectator to your own thoughts, be a witness of your own self, be a silent observer of your own self without judgment, and insight of true reality will come spontaneously. Somebody says, how long do you have to be a silent witness? You can stop any moment and ask yourself, am I aware? And then just be aware. That's all. And the more you do it, the more you have a deeper understanding of the inseparability of all existence, which we also call love. I hope that made sense. Well, I'll keep trying in various ways to point to the truth. But ultimately, you have to be still and rest in being, and not be a victim of centuries of recycled conditioned thought. See you tomorrow.